came back and I became a full-time missionary. Ever since then, I'm still in ministry. I love it. I relate with people in this community. I relate with every kid that I see on the road because I know how they grow up. The high rape is very high, and I relate with those kids. Abuse, and a lot of kids don't have parents. They're growing up with their grandma, and that was me when I was young before I got adopted.
The real blessing that is Fifi is that she is exponentially more effective at sharing the good news and the love of Christ with the Zulu people than any American would be able to. She knows their culture, their language, their joys and their pains. She can relate with them on a level that an American would never be able to do. And it's exciting to see her heart for the Zulu people.
To be able to just share Christ in my own language, for me, it's a blessing for God to be able to use me in this community. I mean, it's hard to be a missionary in the same community where you were born at, but for God to actually use me here, and I still love it. It's amazing.
The mentality of this area, the attitude this community has is one of escape. If you are capable of leaving and making a life somewhere else, then go. Escape this place. Escape the poverty. Escape the memories of abuse. And that's what makes Fifi so unique. Despite being able to go, Fifi stays. She stays to be a beacon of Christ's love to the children here, many of whom are in the same situation she was growing up. And this to me is undeniably the fruit of the Spirit, to face your pain and your past, to stay. Because no one else knows what these kids are going through like you do.
In schools, kids don't have sport. So we started soccer ministry with my brother Wyatt. So kids will come at 4 o'clock twice a week and we teach the Bible. So it's more like Sunday school. It's kids that don't go to Sunday school. And then after we play soccer, we get to know them, we love them. Because most of these kids, they don't get love at home. They don't live that way. They don't experience what love looks like. So you allow them to just be free. And you love them, you show them what love looks like. And that's love of Christ. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I was born in South Africa, but first I'm going to share my testimony. So, I was born in 1994 in South Africa. I lived with my mom and my 4 siblings, my sisters. With my younger sister. There's a cluster town in our village. So she was working there for them. When she found out that she was pregnant and she knew that she was going to die, she told them. So when she died, we were living with her, just her. I didn't know other family members. She was not getting along with her biological mom, her mom. So then she died in 2000. She left us with my sisters, and we were looking after her. My oldest sister, Lee, she was only 10 years old, and I was 6 years old. So around that time, Dad was just surrounding me. The only thing I ever knew was Dad around my community. So my grandma was told by our neighbors that, you need to go get your grandkids because they don't have anyone to look after them. So when she came and took us, and that's when everything started. Mind you, I didn't know anything about Christ. I didn't know anything about God. We were never introduced to Christ. So then we moved in with my Zulu grandma and my uncle, who was sexually abusing us and physically abusing us. And that's how the living condition went. But before we moved in with him, my mom, who is my adopted mom now, she was here in the States. They came back in 2001 and they took my sister, the youngest, Zoe, because she was also. So they took her and they came back to the States, but they left us behind. So when we stayed with my Zulu grandma, we lived in those conditions for so long. Then in 2006, my adopted parents here in the States, they felt God was calling them to South Africa. So they came back to South Africa. They saw the village that we were living in, and that's the same village, the video that was taken. So, I mean, in that community, they know everything about my Zulu family and the struggle. And nobody in my family, my Zulu family, has ever been married. All of them have had a lot of children, different fathers. So not even one person was ever saved in my Zulu family as well. So I remember when my parents, my adopted parents, came to South Africa in my village to visit us to see how we were doing, because they left us in 2000. And I just remember my adopted dad looking at us, and now when I talked to him, he said, I knew that there was something happening with your family, and I just couldn't leave you behind. We moved in with my parents and they started the adoption papers. And I remember they started sharing Christ with us. For me, it was a struggle because I was like, how can a loving God, and you talk about Christ loving us so much and coming on earth to die for our sins? For me, that did not make sense to say, wow, then he allowed us to go through what we went through. But I didn't know God's plan. And he was planning bigger things for me to save him one day, especially in my community. The community that is full of sin, the community that there's a lot of death. And then in 2009, I started working with my dad before I even got saved. I didn't know English because my first language is Zulu. So I would go him and I would try to translate for him. My dad was working with people who were dying of AIDS. People were just dying like flies in my community. AIDS was just everywhere. A lot of kids were dying, and I remember moving in with my phone to bury people. So I started walking with him, like I would do home visit with him, trying to translate. In 2009, I remember it was Christmas Eve, because when you share the story of Jesus being born, you have to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I believed, and I knew that I was going to go back to my community, because I wanted them to know what I knew. And I wanted them to feel the peace. I was telling Auntie Becky that it's better to live in those conditions and be poor, but you have a relationship with Jesus Christ. And then in 2017, I went to Bible school for a year just to get to know more. And because in my community, it's a challenge to be a missionary. They believe in ancestor worship. So I went away for a year and I came back and I started working with kids who were dying of AIDS. A lot of people in America think in Africa people know about AIDS, they can take care of themselves, but not in my village. It's still a struggle. I've been burying a lot of people who are my age and kids that come to soccer. Most of those kids, they don't have parents. They don't know their fathers. I did not know my biological dad. My adopted dad took me to see him, but then within a few months he died. So those kids, they're also living with their grandmothers because their parent died of AIDS. So then I went back to my community. I started working with the kids in my community and home visits, and it's something that I'm still doing. And then last year, there were a lot of challenges. I was tired. I was overwhelmed with the sin. I was overwhelmed with the living condition. And then I was also engaged at that time. The men in our community, they think it's okay to have a lot of women. So I had to break up my engagement because of that. Then I just started grieving and I was asking God, what's next for me? I have a good chance to come to America. My dad is American. And I thought maybe I should come back and just live here and just live like a normal person. That's what I thought, but I did not know God had a bigger plan for me. That he was not done with me in my community. So I went away for a while, but then when I went away, as I was praying and I was spending most time, reading songs and just grieving to the Lord, and God kept reminding me Proverbs 3, that's my favorite verse, to trust in Him. And I kept reminding myself, trust in the Lord with all your heart, because I was just so struggling. And then I remember as I was grieving, I got a call from one of my friends saying, one of the kids in my community, because we're struggling with witchcraft is the biggest issue. There's a lot of witch doctors. So then she called me, she's like, there's a boy that is missing and we can't find him. I started praying about it, and they cut his private parts. So witch doctors, they do that. They wait for different medicine, which I have no idea why. But he was very sick, one of the kids at soccer said I must go see him. I've dealt with a lot of people dying from AIDS, but that one was. So I remember going to his house and his mom said, I do not want him. So you can do whatever with him, but I don't want to take care of him. So I remember walking in the room and I said to Sarah, I've shared the gospel with him countless times. But because he was so sick and I knew that he was going to die, but I wanted to make sure that he understands the gospel. I remember sitting with him and I said to him, if you understand what I'm going to say, I want you to squeeze my hand, because he couldn't speak anymore. His last days, and he died. And I knew that I couldn't leave my kids. And then the guy who came and took the video of me speaking this year, and I was getting ready also to come here. Also, I was not even sure if I was still going to come here, because Grace Bible Church here, they offered to pay for my travels to come. But I was scared, because I'm not even sure if I wanted to be. I just wanted to live a normal life, but at the same time, I knew a normal life for me, I wouldn't find peace. My visa is all, but God opened the doors, and I did get my visa because of COVID in South Africa. We were not allowed to travel, but it was God's plan and God's timing. And then the guy he asked if he can take a video of me doing ministry, and I allowed him to come. So in my community, I know every single person, because I've been there for so long, and I was born there. Few grandmothers said, can they allow? And I was saying, I cannot leave that. And I knew that God wanted me to go back home and be a missionary. It's not easy. It's a challenge. The living So I just asked it. But God has opened some doors for me to go and speak in different churches. So I'll be leaving on the 1st of November. I'm homesick as well, so you can pray for me. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and speak today. Thanks.
Children, you may be dismissed. Wow. I'm a child of God. So Fifi's 29 years old?
27.
27 years old. So 27 years old and already caring for the people in her village. Wishing she's a more comfortable place to be back with them and care for them. The missions team with her ministry, they're going to be talking to her after the service. We can learn more about that in the chapel over to the side. What we be doing, but with the same kind that you have in Christ. And so the hope is that parents can for that. So the things that are whole. There's a reality that they're telling you about that in next year, having cameras in the rooms and all of those things. And we want to teach you, we want you to know how to identify those things and how to make sure those things get reported to the right people. And so please participate with Kaiser. and see how you can be set up to do that thing. So we're not asking you to do something that we're like, well, we just need to check this off the list. We're asking you to do this because every possible thing we can do to care for our children has to be done. All right? Does that make sense? So if you work with children and you haven't done that, then I this is to the choir master with stringed instruments. And from Paul, O God of my righteousness, you have given me relief when I was in distress. Be gracious to me and hear my prayer. O men, how long shall my honor be turned into shame? How long will you love vain words and seek after lies? Selah. But the godly for himself, the Lord hears when I call to him. Be angry and do not sin. Ponder in your hearts on your beds and be silent. Selah. Offer right sacrifices. Put your trust in the Lord. There are many who say, who will show us some good? Lift up the light of your face upon us, O Lord. You have put more joy in my heart than they have when their grain and wine abound. In peace I will both lie down and sleep, for you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, I pray that as we spend time together this morning, that we would recognize the reason that we are here. That we would prepare ourselves for the relationship we so desperately need. May we understand what a wonderful, pleasant thing it is to dwell in the presence of our Savior, to rely upon. For a while, we're going to pass these trays around, and there's 2 cups stacked together. You're going to take both cups, you're going to split them apart, and there's bread at the bottom, juice at the top, and we'll wait and we'll take those together. Okay? There is this phrase, Psalm chapter 4, in the midst of David calling out to the Lord because of the struggle that he is in, and talking to the enemy and instructing the enemy that they have no power over him, that they can't defeat him, speaking to himself about the things that are true about God. In the midst of all of this, he begins giving instruction to those who are around him about how we approach God. And he says this statement, offer right sacrifices. Offer right sacrifices and put your trust in the Lord. So there's a question here for us to ponder about what are we doing when we gather together in this place. Why are we here this morning? Why do we involve ourselves in a form of service that we call worship? Why do we gather together to pray? Why do we gather together